whispers in the night, shadows long and deep, ancient giants rise, tales of old and true. Traces left behind rise from earth and stone. Giants claim their throne. Awaken from the tomb, giants rule. Calm before.
But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now what's fascinating is this backdrop of where the Gaza hostages are exchanged, and they have this purposefully created banner, some of which carries a lot of symbolism that a lot of people just took for granted. The fist that has 6 fingers are purposefully drawn, and left hand with 6 fingers. So a lot of people online have kind of ridiculed them, saying they don't know how to draw or they don't have the artists, but this is purposeful, and we will see why and how it in the Bible describes that this is precisely the region where the Nephilim came from, the giants. And then we look at the title to use, and it says, "We are the flood, the wars next day, نحن الطوفان, نحن اليوم التالي," in the language. And they are specifically bringing the flood mention back, just like before the flood. And then there's this stone, the megalith, giant stone in the background. So we will examine all of that and see how that brings us back to the Nephilim and the time of the flood, and how all this relates to the people in that region and where they come from and their ancestors. Now, the most famous person that comes from Gath is Goliath, and we know of him later in the book of Samuel. We read about how David and him came across, and that story is very famous. But I want to go back a little further in the book of Joshua, and we read in Joshua 11:22, when Moses sent out the spies and all the to kind of clear out the land, they came out and says, and in Joshua 11:22 it says, "No Anakites were left in Israelite territory, but only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive." So the only 3 places they left were Gath, Gaza, and Ashdod, all that Gaza Strip region. And it's interesting that until this day they would claim that. Now let's see why the 6 finger really matters, and why the verse, like the days of Noah, will be like today. So let's examine. Let's look at 1 Chronicles 20 verse 6. "And yet again there was war in Gath, where was a man of great stature, whose fingers and toes were 24, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, and he also was the son of the giant." Also in 2 Samuel 21:20, "And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he also was born to the giants. 2 Samuel 21:20. In Genesis 6:4, we find out where these giants originated from. We are told, if we go back in time here, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, where the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. So we see where the giants originated. They were the sons of God, fallen angels, who came into the daughters of man and had offspring, or had seed. And where do we read about the seed? Even back a little further. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring, your seed, and her offspring, her seed. And he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So for a long time, they will both have offspring or have seed. And so from that, we can sort of gather that they continue, people of Gaza continue to believe, at least the very high up, whether hidden or not hidden, whether they have it, whether they're returning or continue to carry on. Some people call it genetic malformation or because of inbreeding. But however, this is very clear in the Bible. This was something of satanic result, an origin, and it will have an effect until Jesus Christ return, between her seeds, the Jewish nation, and the seeds of the fallen angels. So interestingly enough, even Netanyahu recognizes this, and he in the news referred to the people of Gaza as descendants of the Amalekites. Now we have to know who the Amalekites are. They are descendants of another group that were descendants of the Nephilim from Genesis. So the group, the Anakites, that Joshua talks about in Joshua 11:22, Joshua says that he went to battle, but only spared the lives of those in Gaza and Gath. In Netanyahu is possibly referring or basing his beliefs on Exodus and Deuteronomy and Samuel that we read earlier. What's also interesting to note is that Haman, in the story of Esther, if you recall, he was a descendant of a king named Agag, of the Amalekites. Now, if you recall, Haman is the villain in the story of Esther, who plots to exterminate all Jewish people in the Persian Empire. But it backfires on him. Now, Agag was a giant in the land. His coffin or bed was about 13 feet long, and so he was clearly a giant. And Netanyahu himself, in his remarks, referred to the people of Gaza as the Amalekites. Now let's kind of put all these together. So the purpose of this is in visiting Gaza Lago once more time to see that their portrayal of the 6th finger is on purpose and is referring to their origins, whether it's here returning, but it certainly gives us a time, as in the days of Noah. Prior to Noah, there were these giants, these Amalekites, these were walking around beforehand. All right, let's just get an idea of the lineage of what's happening here. So the Nephilim were giants that were a result of the copulation of the sons of God with the daughters of men, the fallen angels with humans, human women. And the Bible kind of briefly addresses it. Our churches are afraid to go into that. But however, it's in the Bible, it's clear. It continues on a battle in the Old Testament, and sometimes it would make sense. We know why God even commanded Saul to eliminate all the people, and Saul spared King Agag, and we saw what happened. King Agag, as a result of that, Haman was a descendant of that, and there are many descendants beyond that as well, as a result of Saul's disobedience. And in Numbers we see that, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. That's how big they were. We were small as grasshoppers. And so let's look at them. So the Nephilim were pre-flood. They were probably extra gigantic. There is evidence to that, and we'll see that later, some temples and some stones of that. But then after the flood, they kind of continued, and we saw that, obviously, we see that in a very famous character, Goliath and his brother. But in the Bible, it describes the Anakim, which is part of the Nephilim. They were giants, sons of Anak, king of Bashan. And then we also see the Amalekites, who were descendants of the Anakim. They were sort of sub-giants, if you will, whom Saul spared their lives, and that's why Saul was punished, because he kind of let them go. As a result, they had Agag, and later on Haman in the book of Esther. There are other giants referred to in the Bible, Raphaim, obviously, and Goliath from Gath, and the like. So this is just an overview to get you acquainted with that. But just like in the days of Noah, going back before the flood, what was happening? There was this destruction. The seed was against the seed. The offspring was against the offspring. The offspring of the Nephilim were against the offspring of God. The Jews against the offspring of Nephilim. And we see clearly in the banner what they represent themselves, okay? All right, so before we visit Baalbek, let's kind of review what the Bible says about Baal, because this city is named after him. A lot of people are unaware. It still exists. It is in Lebanon. It's mostly of Shia Muslim. Hezbollah is the main, it controls the main region. They have the training and weapon. It's a strategic valley in this area. They use this area in smuggling from Iran to Lebanon via Syria, because of a very strategic location. It's very well protected. You can see from all angles. Now, things to note here. It's considered the ancient site of giants, of Nephilim. And the rocks and the stones and the temples are unreal. Now, some people put that to the Romans, but we'll look at it further. So the location and the temples of Baal, just hence the name, and other gods like Jupiter, which is equivalent to Zeus, the temple of Jupiter, the temple of Bacchus, god of wine and fertility. And the temple of Jupiter was colossal, with some of the largest stones blocks ever used in construction. So who is Baal? In biblical context, Baal is mentioned as a false god, but he is a fallen angel, one of the fallen angels worshipped by the Canaanites, and sometimes also by Israelites. And it led to conflict. And sometimes we say, oh, this happened in the old days, but to this day, these gods have taken on different forms over the years and the centuries, and they are still alive today. So prophets such as Elijah often condemned the worship of Baal and called the people back to worship Yahweh. So it's very important to know that these are demonic spirits, demonic gods, that until this day, they required children sacrifices. Today we call it abortion, for example. But over the centuries, it has modified. Let's look at some of the structures that that proves their presence. While it is not very famous among most Christians, Baalbek because it takes on the name of the god, has enormous, awe-inspiring stones. As you can see, the reference is there, and this is just a portion of the stone. The rest of it is stuck in ground, and some of it is broken off. And the sheer size of it is enormous. And in this section here, we can see the man standing next to it, and what a colossal structure. So the reason why we think that these rocks are from the pre-flood giants and the temples were destroyed, they are dated pre-flood, number one. The sheer size and weight of the stones, which seems difficult to move even with modern technology, indicates that there were some other being or some giant that were able to move them. And there's the lack of clear evidence about how the Romans could have transported and placed such massive stones really rules them out as belonging to the Romans. Now, they built around them, they built temples around them in ancient Roman history, in the empire. But the speculation that the platform on which the temple of Jupiter was built might have been part of an earlier unknown civilization, and the Romans were in awe, so they built their temples around. I hope this clarifies some of your questions and makes clear, and I hope you make your own decisions based on biblical references. And most importantly, if you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, all you have to do is confess with your mouth that Jesus, and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord, that He died for you on the cross, and that He rose again, and that He will return to take us all. Just keep looking up. And if you have any other questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me.